All righty, now I'm ready to share screen. Okay, so welcome to class today, everybody. This week, we're going to be covering Chapter 1, Introduction to Microbiology. And today, we're going to talk about how we define microbes. We're going to get some practice in answering some questions, some active study techniques, all sorts of good stuff. All right, so here's an overview of what we're going to try to cover today. I always set up more than I think I'm going to cover, just in case, we go faster than I think we're going to, and then I don't end up with, a whole lot of nothing, and we've got, 30 minutes. Okay, so we're going to go over this week's learning objectives. Okay, I'm going to open it up for questions. We're going to talk about evolution. We'll talk about what a microbe is. We'll talk about whether microbes are our friends or whether they're bad guys or they pose enemies. And then I don't think we're going to get to taxonomy, but it's there in case we have time. And then we'll go over what to do for next time. Okay, so here are our course learning objectives for this week. So everything that we're going to do is going to be toward meeting these 4 objectives. Okay. The first one is to define the key role of evolution as it applies to microbiology.
You can't see me, can they?
No.
Oh, you can't see it?
That would be horrible.
Okay, let's try this again. All right, can you see it now?
Open it.
Okay, maybe that's not for me. All right. So here are the 4 course learning objectives that we're going to cover this week. Define the key role of evolution as it applies to microbiology. Identify microbial structures and connect the structures to their functions. That's one that we're going to be doing a lot through this semester. Identify pivotal components of microbial systems important to human health. Okay, so we're going to be talking today about the microbiome and also how pathogens fit into that. Okay, so those are microbial systems. And then analyze and describe the impact of microorganisms. Okay, so as a part of talking about the microbiome, we're going to be talking about that. Okay. All right, any questions? Any questions from what you read? Any questions that you have? I'm happy to cover them and go over any topics that you've been reading through that you're having a hard time with.
So my question for the this is one of like the taxonomy questions for
Sure.
Like it's split up into the first part and then the last part is like the species, right? Or no, the strain. How do you know if it's like a fungus or?
Oh, that is a good question. How do you know whether it's a fungus or a protozoan or a bacterium? You don't. Yeah, you have to, if you're familiar with the organism because you worked with a lot, then you would know. Otherwise, that's something you have to look up. Yeah.
Okay.
So,
because
go ahead.
Because it like in the practice questions it asked, what is it? And I was like, how did they expect me to know that? So
Was that in my practice quiz or was that in dynamic
the books.
study? Yeah. No, what they expect you to do is to look it up. Yeah. So for example, let me go ahead and pull up the whiteboard. Okay, so because I've worked with these organisms, and let's change this from orange, let's change this to black. I know that E. coli is a bacterium. At least the one that I'm used to working with. So that's, if I were to spell it out, and I unable to spell the species name, but it's Escherichia coli. Okay, that one I know is a bacterium. There's also another one that's amoeba, and I think I'm spelling that wrong. Excuse my spelling. Coli. Okay, that one I just happen to know is a protozoan. Okay, it's an amoeba. So with that one, amoeba is in the name, and that might be, sometimes you can tell if it happens to be in the name. But most of the time it's not in the name. And so I think, I haven't done the dynamic study recently. I think they expected you to look it up in the book. Yeah. Other than that, I can't tell by looking unless I'm familiar with the organism. Yeah. So anyway, I know that's not a very good answer. I'm sorry. Okay, other questions?
Yes, actually, the E. coli just reminded me. So when I was reading, it was stating that basically the E. coli is found like in the stomach and the colon area.
Mhm.
Does that mean when there's like an E. coli outbreak or poisoning on like vegetables and stuff, does that come from like an animal's fecal system? How does that work?
That most certainly comes from an animal's intestinal tract.
Okay. So E.
So-
coli poisoning is basically you're eating fecal matter.
Not necessarily. Not necessarily. Let's go ahead and talk about E. coli. And you guys are going to get a view of my very funny cartoons. Funny because they're terrible. So I'm going to do my happy cow here. And we're going to go ahead and put a tail on our cow here because, you know, we're going to be talking about the back end of our happy cow. And let's go ahead and give them pupils because, you know, that makes it look a little less scary. Okay, and so let's go ahead and let's put a tree here. Okay, so I've got an apple tree. Okay. And by the way, in this example, this came from an actual situation. I'm really not picking on organic produce. Okay. So here's an apple tree. Okay, we've got some lovely ripe apples. And part of the plan is that because this was an organic orchard, is that the little cow pies here, the feces from the cows, would provide fertilizer for, you know, our tree in this very happy organic orchard. You know, so we have organically grass-fed cows, organic apples. Okay. And there was an outbreak of E. coli. Okay, and hemorrhagic E. coli tends to be a normal part of the intestinal tracts of cows because most of the time it doesn't bother it. When we get it, it bothers us a lot. And so, you know, there was an outbreak of E. coli in apple juice. And so they traced it back to this organic facility. And the plan is that, okay, I'm going to put my ladder here. And when you have somebody who's picking, boy, that's a really small person. Yes. Excuse the perspective on this. The plan is that, you know, you're not supposed to pick up the apples off the ground, okay? Because they could have landed in feces, okay? You're supposed to, when you're picking apples commercially, is you're supposed to pick the apples and, you know, put them in your bag and then put them in the bins, okay? But they didn't communicate to the workers very well. They said, don't pick up any ground or what we call ground fall. Those are apples that have gotten too ripe and have fallen off the tree and landed on the ground.
Oh.
And so anyway, what happened is if they dropped an apple and it wasn't ground fall, they said, well, it's not ground fall, it's not too ripe. They were picking them up and putting them in the big bins to go
Ah.
to the press,
Which caused the outbreak.
which caused the outbreak. And they weren't falling in visible feces, but there was invisible feces, and they went through a washing process because, you know, they washed the apples before they pressed them. But with hemorrhagic E. coli, what we're finding is that they are very odd for bacteria that live inside of animals, in that they are able to attach to fruit and vegetables and hang on through the washing process.
Oh, wow.
So all the feces were washed off, but they were still hanging on to the apples.
Okay,
And
so
yeah, and it was unpasteurized apple juice.
so is that usually when you hear about an E. coli outbreak, is that usually the type of E. coli that's people are getting sick from?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Most of the time, it's what we call hemorrhagic E. coli. That's a shortened version. If you want the most common strain of hemorrhagic E. coli, it's 0157H7, if I remember correctly.
Isn't
And
that
so
what the book
sometimes-
was saying?
Yeah, that's what the book
Yeah,
is saying.
okay.
Yeah, that's the most common kind in the United States.
Ah.
And when we get to virulence factors, we'll talk about what the O means and what the H means. And so yeah, with this particular strain, it's got, okay, I'm going to use the analogy of grappling hooks. They're not really grappling hooks, but it does the same thing. And they're able to hold on to not only the intestinal cells of cows and humans, but they're also able to hold on to plant matter.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so the washers weren't getting enough off that it didn't, you know, that it caused an outbreak. And because the apple juice was unpasteurized, that was also a problem in this case, because pasteurization would have killed the E. coli.
I see. Okay.
Yeah, so like I said, I'm not picking on organic, but because I'm a microbiologist, sorry, I can't drink unpasteurized stuff.
So is that usually a problem that comes up from organic foods since we're not picking on them?
No, we've had outbreaks in non-organic facilities too.
I see.
But this one, because it just was so perfect to show how it got from cow to feces to apple juice.
Yeah.
That's why I pick on this particular example. We've had outbreaks in cantaloupes that did not come from an organic facility. We've had outbreaks in alfalfa sprouts and tomatoes and cucumbers. That
Wasn't there
non-
like romaine lettuce too before, I think fairly recently?
Yeah, that's one of the more recent ones was romaine lettuce.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about?
Yeah,
when it
but the
comes
good
from-
thing is we, you know, we're pretty good when we have an outbreak. The FDA chases it down, and then you know, we shut it down, and the facilities change what they're doing. Like in this situation, you know, they explain to the workers, hey, it's not just that they're too ripe; it's that they're landing in cow poop.
Yeah.
So
Yeesh.
they stopped picking up any apples that hit the ground, and then they haven't had an outbreak since then.
Ah,
Yeah. Yeah.
So what if it's like E. coli outbreak, like with meat, like ground beef or chicken? Like, is it
Ah.
a different kind of E. coli, or is it just because like through the process of them prepping this meat to sell, there's E. coli obviously getting on them from the bowels?
Yep. That's exactly what's happening. It's the same E. coli, but you know, they're supposed to do certain things in the slaughterhouses to make sure that there's as little fecal contamination as possible. You're not going to get zero. In biology, there's no such thing as zero, but you decrease the amounts to the point that people handling the raw meat shouldn't get sick from it. And then cooking it will get rid of an awful lot, but you want low counts of any kind of intestinal bacteria in meat or apple juice or whatever. Because, you know, people are going to handle it with their hands and they're going to put it on their counters before they cook it. And then, what do you do after that? You wash everything down, but you still want low numbers. And then you cook it before you ingest it. Yeah, so when we've had outbreaks, it's when there's been a problem with the facility, or we've had large numbers of cows that have had higher than usual numbers of hemorrhagic E. coli in their intestines. And just FYI, we tend to see higher numbers of hemorrhagic E. coli or E. coli at all in cows that have been corn fed. E. coli likes corn. Yeah. Yes, Rochelle.
Oh, I was just going to say later on in the book, I think we talk about E. coli in the body with UTIs and how common that is.
Yep, you can't. That's an example of jumping ahead to friend or foe. You have E. coli in your intestines and they're your friends when there's low numbers of them, and if they don't crawl up your urethra and get into your bladder. It's a case of E. coli being your friends in your intestines and being your enemies in your bladder. So yes, thank you, Rochelle. That was a good point.
And that's no different than like the yeast situation, because I was reading about the antibiotics. The antibiotics kill all the good stuff, and the yeast is opportunistic. So in the female body, that's why you usually get yeast infections after antibiotics.
Yep, because yeast are not going to be killed by antibacterial medications.
No, because it's a fungus.
Because it's a fungus, exactly. So you have a certain number of yeast all over your mucosa, in your mouth, all the way down your digestive tract, your reproductive tract. Usually we don't get yeast infections in the bladder, but it has been known to happen. So yeah, you remove the bacteria, the yeast multiply, and we get too many of them and you get a yeast infection, and yeah, it's not good for you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So speaking of which, what do we do to prevent that? You're going, I wish I knew. If I'm taking an oral antibiotic and it's killing off of all of my good buddies.
Take a
Then-
probiotic.
Yeah, it was
take
like
a
mentioning
probiotic.
yogurt and stuff like that. Anything with probiotics in it with the good bacteria.
Yep. And there are friendly yeast that you can take. Yeah. That will offset your opportunistic pathogens. But one thing that it's like, why didn't I realize this before? With I was talking to a pharmacist when I was taking an antibiotic, and they're at the counter, and I said, I'm planning on taking a probiotic to go with it. And he said, what kind of probiotic are you taking? And I said, it's got this bacterium, this bacterium, this bacterium. And he says, make sure you either take that an hour before your antibiotic, or even better, 2 hours after.
Oh, so
Because
they
if
don't
you take
interact?
them- exactly. You take them at the
Oh.
same time, and your antibiotic is killing off your probiotic.
Oh.
So 2 hours after the antibiotic has gone through your system, then you can put your little friends in without putting them into the middle of a firefight.
Oh, yeah, that's a good idea.
So Rochelle, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I was going to touch on like diet. A lot of people forget the benefits of fermented food, eating your sauerkraut or your sourdough or kimchi or things that you don't even think about, but they do wonders for the body.
Yeah, yogurt.
Or like apple cider
especially-
vinegar, is that considered
Yep.
something fermented? Yeah, I drink that every single day. It's horrible at first, but once you get used to it, it's okay.
Yes. But this is the apple cider vinegar is the unpasteurized with the mother. So make sure it's got that lovely sediment in the bottom.
Yeah, it does. I
Yogurt-
have to shake it up each time. It's kind of funky looking.
Yeah, you got kimchi, you got sauerkraut. Personally, I eat lacto-fermented pickles as opposed to the vinegar pickles. Partially because I'm allergic to the bacteria that make vinegar. Yeah, I'm weird. So so yeah, I don't eat vinegar. So Yeah, so all of these are good things to be eating anyway, but when you're on an antibiotic, it's especially good to be either taking a probiotic or eating your lacto-fermented foods. Okay, excuse me, other questions? Okay, you guys anticipated me. You're fantastic. You're going to do really well on our modeling practice. Good job. All right, let's go back to the PowerPoint. Oh, let's see. I'm going to go to here. There we go. And if you do have other questions as we go along, feel free to let me know. I'm happy to stop and answer your questions. Okay. All right. Let's talk about evolution. I call this the elephant in the room. So first, let's talk about what the theory of evolution is. Okay. So first off, a theory is a hypothesis. Okay.
You still here?
Oh, yes, go ahead.
Bye. I'm like, I didn't know if you were here. No.
I don't think that was for me. All right. So a theory is a hypothesis, and a hypothesis is a testable question, something we can do scientific experiments on, okay, that has been backed up by years of experiments and data, okay. So it moves from a hypothesis to a theory, okay. And the theory of evolution, okay, was first proposed by Charles Darwin, and there's two components of it, okay. One, populations have variation. In other words, you look at a group of people and we're all different. We're all a little bit different. Genetically, we're really close, but we do have a little bit of genetic variation, okay. Of my siblings, there's only one that I look like, but we're all blood relatives, but we've got genetic variation. And with that variation, if there is a change in the environment or environmental pressure, then those individuals that don't survive well in that environment are going to be eliminated. And those that do well in the new environment are going to reproduce better. And there's going to be a change in the population over time. So that's what evolution is change in a population over time, okay? Now, the theory of evolution does not deal with individuals except for as a source of variation, okay? Evolution, we're interested in population, groups that change over time, okay? Now, most of this we've drawn from the fossil record, okay? And looking at related organisms, okay? That we currently see. And then we look at their anatomy to see how similar they are, how different they are. And then we also look at their genetics now that we have genetic tools to look at how similar they are, how different they are, okay? Now I realize that there is a potential conflict with religion, okay? Personally, I am not anti-religion. I'm actually very religious. I'm active in my church. And for me, religion deals with the metaphysical, okay? Things that we can't run experiments on, okay? There are things that we just can't, that science can't answer, okay? Whereas for science, that deals with things that we can set up experiments and we can run experiments to figure out processes and that kind of thing. So for me, there's no conflict. And I don't want you to feel like that I'm attacking religion. And if you're not religious, I'm not going to try to convert you or anything like that. That's not part of the curriculum, okay? But we are going to be talking about evolution, how it relates to microbiology. And the reason why I like it is it has predictive value, okay? So I'm going to use an example that you're probably more familiar with, and that's weather, okay? We have models that predict what the weather is going to be. Now, back in the day, our weather models were not very good. So they were right 50% of the time, which is not very good. They've gotten really, really good And they've gotten to the point where they can tell you a week out and with fairly good accuracy what the weather is going to be. Now, are they right 100% of the time? No. But usually they'll send out an alert, and I love the Doppler radar that lets you see the storm as it moves past the map. Isn't that great? So you can say, okay, it's moving west to east. It has now hit Parma and Caldwell. I'm in Boise. You know, I don't want to have to deal with snow on the road, so I better head home now. Evolution is the same way. It has predictive value. Okay. So in microbiology, here's an example of predictive value of the theory of evolution. Okay. So I'm going to pull up the whiteboard again. And I'm going to, whoops, come on. I'm going to clear my board here. So let's say I've got a population of bacteria and I'm going to put them down as dots. And I have some cute orange bacteria, okay, and they're the majority of the population, okay, and these we're going to say this is just one kind of pathogen, okay, and then let's say that we have a few in this same species, but they're a little bit different, okay. So most of the orange ones we're going to say are susceptible to penicillin, okay, but you know, we've got a few of these pink ones that are resistant. They're able to produce an enzyme that inactivates penicillin, okay? So let's say that this is in my throat, causing strep throat, okay? I swallow some penicillin, and that penicillin is gonna go in and it's gonna take out most of these. Now it's gonna leave this one alone because it's resistant. So it's going to take out, okay, so through the theory of evolution, we're going to say, okay, we now have a new environmental pressure, okay? So we're going to say penicillin took out all of these. Now we're going to say that my white blood cells are going to come along and swallow down some more, you know, the susceptible ones that got past, okay? And they're going to get most of them. Okay, so these are my white blood cells swallowing down these. And they're going to get some, okay, of the resistant ones. Now, the hope is that they're going to go through and clear out the resistant ones as well as the susceptible ones, okay? The ones that the penicillin didn't get. But nothing is 100% in biology. My white blood cells aren't going to get all of them, and the penicillin is not going to get all of them. So the natural consequence is that I'm going to have a change in the population and I'm going to have more resistant bacteria in the environment of my throat. And as I speak and cough, it's going to spread to other people. Okay. Have we seen an increase of resistant bacteria? Yeah, I've seen a few head nods. Yeah, this is a change in the population, okay? Back when we first started using antibiotics on a regular basis in the 40s, okay, clinical samples that were collected were mostly susceptible. We did see a few resistant ones, but it was like, huh, that's interesting. Nowadays, it's like, yep, it's resistant. We better come up with some new antibiotics. And then the new antibiotics exert pressure. We have a change in the population, and now we have multi-drug resistant bacteria. So now we're thinking, okay, maybe we ought to come up with something different to kill them. Okay. And recently I read an article where they said, oh, here's a completely different way to kill bacteria, and we're never going to have resistant bacteria again. And I'm going, have you not studied the theory of evolution? There's going to be resistance developed to anything you develop. And so this is just something that's always going to be there. Okay. So predictive value. Okay. Any questions? Okay. If you think of some, let me know. Okay. I'm going to go back to the PowerPoint. We're going to move on to our next topic here. Okay. Oh, not topic, practice. Okay. So now, just because I'm not quite sure. Oh, there was polls right up there. I missed them before. Let me go back and reshare that. I think I just, there's polls. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to launch a poll, and this is anonymous, okay? And so what I want you to do is pick either A, B, C, D, or E. For the definition of evolution is, okay, so I'll let you go ahead and read through that and go ahead and vote. And it's okay if you get the wrong answer, because this is practice. And with practice, you know, sometimes you're going to get the right answer and sometimes you won't. That's the nature of practice. Okay, we've got some good voting on. We've got 54% of you so far.
Could you say the choices for the letters again, please?
Sure. All right, so this first one, A is a cell having DNA inside a distinct membrane enclosed nucleus. A cell whose genetic material is not enclosed in a nuclear envelope. A principle that has undergone years and years in testing and has not been disproven. A label for well-studied and, sorry, the poll's in the way, well-established natural phenomena. Living things ordinarily too small to be seen with the naked eye without magnification. Accumulation of changes that occur in populations of organisms as they adapt to their environments. We've got 95%. I think we just need one more person to vote. Come on, you can do it. You can do it. Speaking of never getting 100%, on these polls, I never get 100%. All right, so I'm going to share my results. So most of you picked D, the accumulation of changes that occur in populations of organisms as they adapt to their environment. Okay, but 24% of you picked a principle that has undergone years and years of testing and has not been disproven. Okay, so part of these polls is I have people who picked that answer, defend their answer. Okay, I realize it's scary, so if you don't want to do it, you don't have to do it. But I would like someone who picked E, since that's the most popular, to tell me why you picked E.
Did you say E or B?
E, the accumulation of changes that occur in a population of organisms.
Isn't that the definition of evolution?
It is the definition of evolution. Very good. By the way, and sorry on Thursday because of technical issues, we did get through Bloom's categories, but sort of. Anyway, this would be a remembering question. Okay. Now, for the folks that picked C, this is the next best answer. Okay, it's not correct, but it's what I call the best wrong answer. Okay, why is it the best wrong answer?
Isn't that a theory?
It is a theory, and we always say the theory of evolution. So if you pick C, it's because you were thinking theory and you were thinking the theory of evolution. Okay, so it was the next best answer. Okay, the question was asking about evolution, not theories, but it's understandable to not have those two separated at this point. Okay, so don't feel bad if you pick C. Not a problem. This is practice. Okay.
So I had a question.
All right. So I'm going to stop sharing on this puppy and I'm going to get it out of the way. And we're going to go to a harder question. Okay. This next one would be what we call an application style question. I want you to take what you know about evolution and apply it to some situations that you haven't heard of. Okay, actually, one of them we did cover, but there is more than one right answer for this one. So I'm going to relaunch the poll. Yes, I want to continue.
No, you can talk. They're not listening. No, it's okay, Mama. I'm fine. I don't know what.
Rosa, we can hear you.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, no problem. Yeah, I was just finding you to mute you, but there we go.
So you
Okay.
wanted to pick one for this answer, this
Yes,
question.
pick
correct?
one, but there is more than one right answer. So pick whichever one you like the best.
Okay.
What is E?
Oh, so actually there's no E. I don't have a poll that has A through D. I need to set that up. So yeah, ignore E. Okay, we're at 63%. We're at 72%, 77, 81. Good job. Okay, just a few more. And oh, there we go. We're at 90%. Two more people. We'll get 100%. And we stalled.
Javon, while we're waiting, I really like your hair today.
Thank you very much. I actually had to come into CWI, so I had to, take a shower and look nice.
Oh. I can understand that one. Okay, we've got 95%. We're going to say that's good enough. So I'm going to end the poll and I'm going to share the results. Okay, so most people pick C. More samples of the bacterium Staphylococcus aureus that are isolated from skin lesions are resistant to methicillin than 10 years ago. Okay, so that is one of the right answers. Good job. Okay, who would like to tell me why they picked it? Tell me why it's the right answer.
Because in the example we did earlier on strep, it's basically like the same thing, methicillin and the resistance.
It is very good. Okay, and we're also talking about a population. We're talking about a population because we're talking about more than one sample. Okay, good job. Now, the next favorite answer, which is also one of the right answers, was D. Within the last 2 months, the most commonly isolated variant of COVID in the Treasure Valley is Omicron. In October 2021, the most commonly isolated variant was Delta. Okay. So who wants to tell me why they picked that one as an example of evolution?
It's because it's mutating and changing on a
It's
rapid rate.
Exactly. It's mutating, which introduces variation. And Omicron is doing better in the current environment. It spreads more easily, so it's infecting more people. It's not making them as sick. So they're going around spreading it.
But it's able to attach to the host faster and easier.
It is, which if you're a pathogen, that's what you want to do. And if you're a pathogen, you don't want to kill your host off. You kill them off too fast, you can't spread to the next person. If you have more mild symptoms, you're going to spread more easily. So very good. Okay. Now, B is a complicated correct answer. Okay. Want me to go over why it's sort of the right answer? By the way, on the test, I would not have an answer like this. That's sort of right. At least that would not be in my, I would not do it intentionally. Let's put it that way.
Can I ask you?
Yes.
Oh, sorry. As far as B, I mean, it might have some truth, but it seems kind of subjective. Like, how do you prove that it was the asbestos?
Right. That's what I was going to
And
say. You have to prove
Not
it.
other factors.
Yeah, with cancer, that's a hard one. With asbestos, and I think I just said it wrong, asbestos. Yeah, I was putting the emphasis on the wrong syllable. We have enough data to indicate that asbestos is a carcinogen. And if you breathe enough of it in over the years, it increases your likelihood of getting cancer.
But
So
you'd have
that-
to prove that you'd have to prove that they breathed in enough of it. You can't just say a worker who worked there for a year and that's where they got it.
Yeah. Oh, well, it's years. I didn't tell you how long.
Okay.
I should have told you how long. What if I said that a 60-year-old man who worked in this asbestos factory for 40 years?
Then that one would be better because at least then you had a length of time that he was exposed to it. So you'd have some proof of why he evolved into getting the cancer.
Right, because if he worked
Right.
there for only 2 years and say he was a part-time smoker or he was around secondhand smoke, then you can't really nail that one down.
Exactly. You're right. You
Or
are exactly right.
Roundup, because now they're saying Roundup too.
Yeah, there's Roundup, and you know what? I've used Roundup, but I haven't been a farm worker where I was getting back spray from it day in and day out for the past 20 years. So I would not be able to win a case for my non-Hodgkin's lymphoma or Parkinson's from using Roundup. Because I just use it in the summer on those stupid goat heads. Speaking of evolution, they're winning. They're winning against my attempts to eradicate them from my yard. Because they're naturally resistant to Roundup. But yeah, so sorry I got distracted by my not liking goat heads. So
That's no joke though. We've tried Roundup and everything here too, and they won't go away.
no, you have to pull them out when they're babies and before they have seeds.
I use
Oh.
vinegar and soap mixture with some Copenhagen in it.
Used
okay.
Copenhagen or just regular old, I don't have to
Out of
chew
the
it
can.
first.
Yep.
Huh.
I'll
Yeah,
get-
tobacco
I'll look at the
actually,
recipe.
yeah, tobacco shows up in a lot of herbicides and insecticides. Yeah, so I may try that next year because it doesn't matter how wide you go around the goat heads. They get in your shoes and they end up on my floor when I'm walking around in my barefoot. Anyway, so so with this one, if we're talking about the man, then it would not be an example of evolution because it's an individual. Okay. It's not a population. If we were talking about a population of people being eliminated by breathing in asbestos, that would be an example of evolution. An unfortunate example of evolution. But so with an individual, then no, it would not be an example of evolution because evolution is populations. But what about the cells of his lung cancer? That's a population of cells that have mutated and they divide faster and do better than the other lung tissues in replicating themselves. And also they're better at hiding from your immune system. So we actually see evolution in populations of cancer cells. They can become resistant to chemotherapeutic agents. That's why cancer comes back sometimes after 5 years of being cancer-free. You have just a few cells that were resistant to the chemotherapy and they come roaring back. So see why it's it's a right answer, but it's not because of the guy, it's because of the population of lung cancer cells. Yeah, by the way, I wouldn't have anything that difficult on the test. But that
so
makes
is
for
this
good
like-
discussion. Sorry,
Is this like a preview of the exam one? How it
it's
will,
kind, yeah.
how many
it's-
questions are on your exams exactly?
So I generally have 50 questions. If I have a matching, then each matching will be counted as a question.
Okay.
Does that count? Does that make sense?
Yes.
So it'll be one question, but I give you the number of points for matching 5 different things.
So I know I'm not trying to knock the reading or anything. I know we have to read, but how much of the reading is going to be on your exam?
So good question. Tell you what, I'm gonna do a new share. And I'm gonna have to stop share. Because I'm not good enough at Zoom yet. Okay, now I can do the share where I show you where you can find, let's see, I'm going to stop sharing this, where you can find my guide to what's important in your reading. So if you go over here to study guides, I have topics for each chapter that I think are most important. And so, for example, like I'll give you hints on, make sure you go through the Sarago, chapter activities, practice quizzes, you know, these are things to give you some practice. But these are the topics that could be on the exam for each chapter. Now, I use the study guide when I write the exams. So this is the study guide I'm going to use, but I do new questions every semester.
So I've had professors that give us this study guide and we study it, we learn it, we know it. It was a complete waste of time because we get questions that are not even remotely close to the guide. That's not what you do, correct?
Yeah, no. Now, sometimes it may seem like it with application style questions, because you need to take these topics that I want you to learn and apply it to a new situation. So it may seem like it wasn't on the study guide,
But you
that's
tell us to study A, B, and C, and then you're going to give us questions off of X, Y, and Z.
no, I won't do that. I will ask you to combine A, B, and C. And we're going to practice application style questions, like with this one that we went through, where we have a good discussion and talk about why the answers are right, so that you can do well on those application style questions. Yeah.
So would the evolution question automatically follow with the example of evolution question? Or would it be spread out?
I will have all of the chapter 1 questions together, but you know, I'll have application style questions scattered throughout, and I'll have some remembering questions and some understanding questions, and they're kind of mixed up by topic within the chapter. So I won't have a series of evolution questions. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, so for what we do in class, let me pull up my PowerPoint again. Like I said, this is practice, to give you some practice in how I write my questions. And also they're good discussions. I want there to stimulate discussion. And so the ones that we work through in class are going to be harder than what's in the exam. Because like this one had 2 definite positive correct answers and 1 sort of correct answer. I would never intentionally put a sort of a correct answer, but I will put answers that are the best wrong answer. So I will put answers that I know come from a non-complete understanding of the topic. Yeah. I'll also have answers that that are true statements that don't answer the question. Because I want you to read through and say, okay, does this actually answer the question? And the reason why I do that, I realize it's obnoxious. But in the clinical environment, we get a bunch of information. We get a bunch of true statements. And you have to pick through the true statements that actually answer the question of what's going on with the patient. So I'm giving you practice in actual clinical thought processes. Does that answer your question? Does that help?
I'm good.
Okay. All right, let's go ahead and, okay, so with this one, nobody picked A, and you were right, this is completely wrong. Okay, why is this not an example of evolution?
It's
Genetic.
hereditary, right?
It is hereditary, okay? And is it a change in the population? No, it's recessive genetics. Like you said, it's genetics, and it's recessive genetics that pops up in a population. Okay, so both members of the couple somewhere in the past had an ancestor or ancestress that was blonde and blue-eyed, and so they've been carrying those genes that wasn't expressed in them. But when the two recessive genes get together, you have a baby who is blonde and blue-eyed. And it doesn't mean that the wife is sleeping with the mailman. Not necessarily, anyway. Okay, do we feel like we have a pretty good feel for this one anyway? Okay. All right, let's go on to what is a microbe. Okay. All right, so a microbe is anything that's too small for us to see with the naked eye. Okay. Now, in the book, they make a distinction between microbes that are non-living that we study in microbiology, viruses. We're going to get into prions in chapter 6. Okay. And then microbial organisms, those microbes that are alive, that are composed of at least one cell or more than one cell. Okay. And we distinguish these microbes from things that are big enough to see with our naked eye. Okay. What we call macroscopic organisms. Macro for big, micro for little. Okay. So I'm going to pull up the whiteboard and I want you all to come up with some examples of microbes and some examples of things that are not microbes. So I'm going to put macro over here, okay, because A comes before I, and I'm going to put micro over here, okay. All right, so who wants to give me an example and tell me whether it's macro or micro? Let's go ahead and finish the word. Whether it's a macroscopic organism. Hey, Rochelle.
Well, I'll start with macro.
Sure.
So fungi, your bigger fungi like mushrooms, things that you don't need to look at under a microscope to see.
Very good. So mushrooms are an example of a macroscopic fungi. Okay, I'm going to be obnoxious and I'm going to ask you to give me an example of a microscopic fungi. Because fungi come in both kinds.
Could yeast be microscopic?
Yeast, yes.
Like yeast.
Exactly. Yeast are a microscopic example of fungi. Okay. Now, if you do baking or anything like that, your yeast comes in a package and you can see those granules. That's millions and billions of individual yeast. We can only see them when we scoop them out of the vat and pack them together. And that's a group of yeast. It's not individual yeast. Okay. Good job. Yay! What's another example? Either macro or micro.
Wouldn't what we talked about earlier, E. coli be microbe?
Very good. E. coli, okay, would be an example of a microbe, okay, and it's a bacterium. Okay, bacteria are always microbes. Okay, that's not entirely true. This is a good opportunity for me to explain that sometimes I'm going to generalize. Okay, there are one or two species of bacterium that are unusual. They're stinking huge, and you can actually see them with your naked eye if you have better eyesight than I have. But that's unusual. So for this class, to not confuse you with details, I'm going to make a broad statement that bacteria are always microbes. And then when you learn about the exceptions later, then you will say, okay, Teresa warned me that she generalized. Okay, so E. coli. E. coli is a bacterium, it's a microbe. Okay, let's do one more.
An amoeba under microbe?
Yes, an amoeba would definitely go under a microbe. Amoeba. And I think I got the E and the A backwards.
It's fun to say.
It is fun to say. Yeah, and amoebas are protozoa. Okay, and then Rochelle.
Oh, I thought of a gross one. I was thinking of your helmets, your worms, your roundworms, things that you're going to see macro. You've ever had a dog and they're dragging their behind? Yeah,
Oh,
pretty
yes.
nasty.
Oops. Yeah, so worms. Okay, so you can pick apart the feces and see the worms. Okay, now we often study helminths in microbiology. Okay, now why do we study them in microbiology if they're macroscopic?
Because they're a microorganism.
Some of them are. Okay, there are some worms that are microscopic and you have to use a microscope to see them.
Because it, excuse me, because they're parasites.
Yes, because they're parasites. And say, you know, like Rochelle said, you've got a dog that's dragging their behind because it's itchy. And say you pick apart their feces and you can't find anything you can see. What if you took the feces to the vet? They're going to take a smear of that feces, put it on a slide, and they're going to look for either microscopic adults or they're going to look for
Eggs.
worm eggs. Exactly. Or larvae. Because they're microscopic. Okay. So helminths is a good example of both macroscopic organisms, okay, and microscopic. Okay. We have some worms that as an adults, they're microscopic. Okay. And then there are others that, like tapeworms and pinworms, are macroscopic. Okay, but the eggs and the larvae are always microscopic. Okay, yes, Rochelle.
There was another good one in the chat for macro. Somebody had said algae under protease. So like algae blooms. Yeah.
Yes. Okay, so yes, thank you for keeping an eye on the chat, Rochelle. As you can tell, I can't, there's only so many things I can do at one time. If you raise your hand, it pops up in my view in front of my face. Chat's not so much. All right, so algae actually is under both. Okay, so with the blooms that you were talking about, the algae that forms blooms, they are microscopic. We can only see them underneath the microscope until we get to blooms and they form the pond scum, okay, the blooms. But we do have multicellular algae that we call seaweed or kelp. Or if you like sushi, nori. Yeah, so there's some things where we've got macroscopic examples and microscopic examples. Okay, good job. All right, I'm gonna move on. What? Why won't it let me stop? It was saying some weird thing. It wasn't gonna let me go. Okay. Okay, so let's do some practice, and I think that's about as far as we can go. So let's go ahead and do some quick polls. I'm going to relaunch the poll. Okay, so real quick, which of the following is a microbe? We're voting really fast. Good job. And you are picking more than one right answer. Good job. There is more than one right answer. And by the way, I would not put, well, my intent would not be to put two right answers. If I do accidentally, I will go back and give you full points for the other right answer that I did not realize was the right answer. Okay, we're at 90% just because we're running out of time. Most people pick yeast. Good job, yeast is the correct answer. Okay, we had one person pick worm. This is also a correct answer. Hopefully I would not do that to you on the exam. If I did, let me know. I'll go and look and I'll give you points for worm too. Okay. But also yeast is a better answer than worm because we've got some macroscopic worms. We've got some microscopic worms. Yeasty beasties, they're always microscopic. Okay. Let's go to, let's see, how much time have we got? We've got time for one more. Come on. Oh, let's go through. Oh, we don't have time for modeling practice. Okay, well, tell you what, let's go through this real quick. And we're going to do some, oh, do I have time? I've got 10 minutes. I can do it. Okay, so back in the dark ages, when I was getting my degrees in microbiology, we talked about just microbes, bacteria, viruses, protozoa, as being pathogens, as being our enemies, okay? But since then, we have found out that some bacteria, some yeast, some protozoa are actually good for you, okay? And they are a part of your microbiome. What do we mean by the microbiome? Those are the microorganisms that have adapted, okay, to live on the planet that is the human body. Okay, for a microbe, we're stinking huge. So we have bacteria, yeast, and protozoa that live on our skin, on our mucosa. Okay, they're found all over us, and they actually do us some good. Okay, so there's a lot of interest in the microbiome currently, and we actually have a class. Yes, this is a commercial. If you haven't taken it yet, you might want to take Getting to Know Microbiotic Me for your Global Perspectives course. It's a whole lot of fun, and it covers our friends who live on us and in us. Okay. All right. So not all microbes are bad. But with the microbiome, they have to stay where they're supposed to. When your appendix bursts, your intestinal bacteria are your friends in your intestines. But if your appendix bursts and it gets into your abdominal cavity, then, it's lethal. All right. So healthcare acquired infections are those infections that you can get in a healthcare situation. Okay. So here's an example. If I'm out with my family and then I find out the next day that one of my siblings is coughing and sneezing, and they take a COVID test and it turns out they've got COVID, and I get COVID symptoms, 2 days later, and I do a nasal swab and yep, it's positive. Was that healthcare acquired?
No.
No, it's not healthcare acquired.
No,
Now,
a
what-
nosocomial infection would be like if you went in to have surgery and then you wound up getting an infection after the surgery while you were in the hospital, correct?
Exactly. That is exactly right. Or if I went in to get a surgery and I picked up COVID while I was in the hospital recovering.
Yeah, it's basically anything if you're in the hospital or healthcare setting and you pick it up while you're there, that's a nosocomial infection, correct?
Exactly. Yeah,
And-
nosocomial and healthcare acquired infections. For whatever reason, this book likes healthcare acquired. Personally, I like nosocomial better too. Yes,
Is MRSA
Alexa.
a good example of one?
MRSA
Yes.
is a good example. Yes.
Kind of evolution.
Yes. It is a prime example of evolution in action. We've been using antibiotics for long enough that Staphylococcus aureus, that's the SA in MRSA, has developed resistance to a lot of antibiotics, including methicillin. Yep. Okay, so we try to prevent, since you're all wanting to go into healthcare professions, we try to prevent healthcare acquired infections or nosocomial infections. Okay. And that's part of what this class is going to help you do. You're going to learn how to keep those numbers down and keep the numbers down as low as possible. We can't get them to zero because in biology, nothing is zero. Okay, and then there's opportunistic pathogens. We've talked about opportunistic pathogens. They get in the wrong place, or we get too many numbers. Okay. All right, let's see what time we have. Ah, okay. Let's go on to modeling practice really, really quick. Because I don't want to keep you later than we would want to. Okay, so this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to go through on fast forward, and I'm going to make a model of a microbial system, okay, in the human body. Okay, so this is in the intestines. There's my intestinal cells with microvilli, and they're really scary, and I'm drawing them as one continuous sheet, although they are individual cells. And I'm going to put a nucleus here. Okay. All right, I've got 5 minutes. Okay, and on top of that, we have, I wanted yellow. I always do mucus in yellow. Okay. So we have a layer of mucus that helps move things along, and it also sticks bacteria and viruses and stuff in there. So hopefully it doesn't get to your cells before it gets through the mucus. Okay. All right, now we have living in your intestinal tract a large number of bacteria, and I'm going to stick with just bacteria, and I'm going to show them floating above, because later when I eliminate some, if I have them sitting on top of my mucosal layer, I get rid of my mucosal layer. Okay, so we're going to say that there's 3 kinds of bacteria living in harmony with your intestinal tract. Okay. Oh, let's not do green. I was going to do green, but I don't want to do green because ain't no sunshine in your gut. So we generally don't get green. Okay, so we're going to say that there's my red one. Here's my orange one, and here's my lavender one. Okay, and so with this lavender one, we're going to say that it breaks down fiber. Okay, takes the fiber and it creates simple carbs that these guys can eat, and these guys in your intestinal cells can pull them up. Okay, so in the salad that I ate for dinner, okay, I've got salad floating along here. Yep. Okay, these purple guys are going to eat the salad, and then they're going to make stuff that these guys and these guys can eat, and my intestinal cells can eat. Okay, and then we're going to say that these guys produce a vitamin. Okay, but they only eat simple carbs. Okay, and then we're going to say these guys produce a toxin that keeps the numbers down of microbes. Okay, so we don't want very many of those. So this is a happy gut. Now let's say I take an antibiotic that is specific for strep, okay, which is a gram-positive bacterium, and it's also going to take out these guys that are gram-positive. So let's say that my antibiotic came through and eliminated a large numbers of these. What's going to happen? What is the change going to be to my model? What's going to happen?
Well, if it eliminates the fiber, wouldn't that cause diarrhea?
Yes, it will cause diarrhea. Yes, because the fiber's going to go straight through. I'm not absorbing things. So yes, that is one consequence.
Would it be similar to, no, I guess not similar to C. diff, because because C. diff usually
Sure.
comes from, okay, all right.
So how are we going to get C. diff? You are completely correct.
So the one that eats the fiber that produces simple carbs will then not be able to feed the one that makes the vitamin and the toxin, making the other bacteria that the toxin's killing grow more and more and more.
Exactly. So
Because
yeah, let's
they're
go ahead and use
opportunistic?
blue. Yes, because they're opportunistic. Let's say that I've got C. diff. Actually, yeah, C. diff is a rod. And let's say I had a few C. diff hanging around not doing any good. Now that these guys are gone, now these guys aren't going to have enough food. And so I'm going to eliminate these guys. And so I'm going to have an increase of my C. diff because the guy making the toxin isn't going to keep these guys down. Yeah, so that was really fast forward. My apologies. But do you kind of see how a model works? That if I gave you a clinical situation and I tell you how it normally is, and excuse my bad spelling of diarrhea. I'm a horrible speller. I love word check. Spell check rather. So if I gave you a situation saying, okay, this is the normal, but we've introduced this change. I want you to be able to think your way through what would happen. Okay, and we'll practice this some more. Okay, but we're out of time. So let me go back to the PowerPoint and let's fast forward to what to do for next time. Okay, so continue to go through the week 2 lecture folder, read through chapter 1. Okay, write down some questions. You guys had great questions, by the way, and continue to work in chapter 1 in Sergo. And I suggest that you start the week 2 assignments because they are due on Friday. Okay. And then also as you go through and read chapter 1, I suggest that you go through and use the chapter 1 portion of the exam 1 study guide to guide your study of that chapter. Okay, sorry, that was really quick there at the end. Any questions? Okay, anything I missed in the chat that we should talk about real quick?
Somebody just asked about assignments being due on Fridays.
Yes, so here's why I have assignments due on Fridays. Back in the day, I used to have my assignments due on Sunday, along with everybody else at the college. And the college had small enough enrollment that it was not a problem. As our enrollment increased, my students started getting kicked off of Blackboard in the middle of trying to complete assignments or take quizzes. And it was very frustrating. So I moved them to Saturday. And we got along well for quite a while, but then other instructors also figured out that Saturday was a good day. And my students started getting kicked off. So to spread out traffic on Blackboard, you guys get to turn things in on Friday, I'm sorry. So yeah, all of the assignments will be due before it clicks over to midnight on Saturday. Okay, other questions? Okay, by the way, week 1, because it was week 1, you can turn in your week 1 assignments this week and I won't take points off. It says that in the syllabus, but I changed my mind and I haven't changed the syllabus yet. Okay, but starting with this week, I won't accept late work, but I will drop your 2 lowest 20-point assignments. So if you miss 1 or 2, it won't hurt your final grade. You get to start fresh the next week. Okay, any other questions? All right, let's call it good. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording and I'll post that today. We will see you all on Thursday.